St. Patrick's Day, Christmas, we put the world to right. Watched cup finals. And in the middle of the biggest match, you'd flick over to the 4:15 from Fairy House. So many memories. I miss dancing with two left feet to DJ Vinyl Richie or whatever he was called. I've missed that fire in your hearth. I know I took you for granted. I never thought you'd leave. I can't wait to see you again and say those three little words. 2 Heineken, please.
Let's get back together. Heineken sporting the LVA and the VFI. Here's to fresh beginnings. Enjoy Heineken responsibly. Visit drinkaware.ie.
The 2021 British and Irish Lions Tour.
On Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions.
12 years on, Mornay Stain, once again the South Africa hero against the Lions. The Springboks have beaten the Tourists in the final and deciding test by 19 points to 16. They win the series by 2 tests to 1. We're going to break it down now with both Niamh Briggs and Fergus McFadden. Niamh, to start with you, better contest than we saw last week, a much more interesting game than we saw last week, and in the end, South Africa just about edged it.
Yeah, hugely. I think, all the issues that we spoke about before the game, about last week's test, I think the Lions went out and played rugby. They looked to get to the edges. I think Finn Russell was a huge part of that. His ability to play flat to the line, to pick passes in and around that really good South African defence meant that South Africa couldn't really get as much line speed as they'd like. So therefore it created space for them. So yeah, look, I think in the first half, really, really good. I think in the second half, South Africa were always going to hit a purple patch. On first viewing, I feel like the Lions not that they stopped playing, but that they just couldn't get any parity after half-time in terms of territory or possession. So, probably on the balance of it, maybe South Africa probably shaded it, but hugely gutting because there was so much good about it.
Yeah, look, I guess the crucial moment for the Lions, Niamh, is when they got into the scoring zone, when they decided to, push for the line as opposed to going for the post, where they could have squared the game at that point. And eventually, after all the time that they had spent in South African territory, they come away with nothing when they gave a penalty away. Yeah,
look, I think definitely it's, in hindsight, you can always look back and say they probably should have went for posts, but they felt like in the moment that they, really trusted their liner and their drive out maul. I think it was really interesting to watch. If you see whenever they got penalties in scoring zones, Russell was straight away, let's just go to the corner. That's the ambition that he plays with. I think for me, Del Rue, the Liam Williams, Josh Adams 2v1, more so than the fact that they turned down kicks to the post, because I think that can just, that's what you feel, and how you feel as a squad and where the momentum is. It's the other stuff, they're the simple things. And South Africa had one chance in the second half, that 2v1 with Leroux and Colby, and they chose the right option. I just think, unfortunately for the Lions, they missed theirs.
Fergus McFadden, in the end, when you've had a few minutes to digest it now after the commentary, pretty small margins decided both today's game and also the series in general.
Yeah, tiny margins. I think even the decision for whether it was a knock-on or whether it wasn't with Jasper Wiese, when he went up for that box kick, contestable box kick, and with a brilliantly executed try by South Africa from there. Once they broke, I think Chas and Colby is the first bit of space in the 3 tests, and it was probably a try that was worth the winning of the series. And they are the tight margins, and I think in the second half the South Africans just came on the right side of them.
Yeah, and that's 2 weeks in a row now where South Africa have been probably the better team in the second half. And Fergus, as Niamh has mentioned before the game, if you've got that bit of magic in the locker, like they've got with Leroux and like Cheslin Colby, if you're able to execute in the few chances that you get, that can be the difference between the sides.
Yeah, definitely. And you might get a chance, you might not get a chance. And they got one, and they took it. Cheslin Colby, he's been really quiet actually over the last 2 weeks. He's had to do more tackling than anything else. I'm not sure how many carries he's even had, but he had that great moment. And then also that moment where Finn Russell hit him high as well. that was a pretty big moment too. So he picked up the Man of the Match award, and he deserved it.
Niamh, we got to see a lot more of Finn Russell than we probably expected. We thought maybe he would be a game-changing substitution at some point in the second half for the Lions. With circumstance, he ends up coming on with just 10 minutes gone in the game. You said that he made a difference in terms of the way that the Lions attacked. Can you just break down what the actual difference was with Finn Russell there as opposed to Biggar in the first two tests?
Yeah, so Russell likes to attack square and flat to the defensive line. So if you're defending him, it's really hard to be able to move off him if he picks passes out. I think his ability to be able to generate tempo, not just from the scrum half, but from the players around him. You see them running small little lines in behind him where they just pop up off his shoulder. It's really difficult to defend that. I think Biggar's a different type of player. He sits deeper in the pocket, and he doesn't have that kind of pace at the line, at that space that that Finn Russell has. He almost needs no space to be able to rip a 30-metre pass, or even in the first half, I saw him, dink that little kick pass through to Josh Adams. So when you're defending, it's really difficult to be able to, you can't really shift off him because you've got to stay square and try and hit him. And I thought, they obviously did their work because they looked to go around the corner, but hit back on the inside and try and push that pressure and on South Africa from their Hunt player, that player on the inside, because there was small little gaps opening, and that's where they got that, 5, 6, 7 phases in first half where they were able to get some offloads in. So he's just a different player. I think he just, because he attacks so square, it's just really hard to be able to see what he's going to do. But it's also his ability to be able to try absolutely anything in the coalface that not many others would have. I'm not going to say the courage, but probably the skill set to do. So I think that probably opened up the game for the Lions.
Yeah, Fergus, I think it's fair to say Russell kept South Africa guessing all game.
He came to South Africa what?
He kept them guessing all game.
Definitely. I think when he came on, no one really knew, how the Lions were going to start playing, but they definitely played their best rugby throughout the Test series, and it begs the question that maybe that's the way that they should have been playing against South Africa from the first test. They seemed more cohesive. He was bringing in the forwards into the game, whether it was short off his shoulder or taking good options out the back. Then he's got that really tidy kicking game that he showed in the first half to Josh Adams. And in fairness to him as well, he knocked over all his kicks off the tee and a few real pressure ones. So he definitely he's come out of this series, albeit a loser, but with his reputation, certainly intact.
Yeah, Niamh, when it comes to Robbie Henshaw, Fergus was praising him, the fact that he still had all that energy towards the end of the game and he was trying to push on to get the Lions the victory. We talk about, Lions players coming out of the series with plenty of credit. I think Robbie Henshaw's had a remarkable year at international level, between being one of Ireland's best players in the Six Nations and definitely one of the Lions' best players over these 3 tests as well. Yeah,
hugely. He's probably been the man of the series for me from the Lions' perspective. I think he's in such a rich vein of form that it's almost everything that he touches turns to gold, whether it's an attack and defence. I thought his work rate is absolutely phenomenal. He seems to have this engine on him that he can go and go and go at a pace that doesn't seem to relent. But he attacks the ball so well today as well in terms of his carries. He found so much space, and it's just a pity that they couldn't get anybody on his shoulder, because I think he got into a couple of positions where if there had been somebody on his shoulder, then it could have been a try for the Lions, because he'd gotten in behind South African defence. So, look, he'll have to be really disappointed from an overall collective that they didn't win, but he'll, be coming home really happy with the work he's done over the season, because he's just been brilliant.
We spoke before the game, Niamh, about, Henshaw can play comfortably at 12, he can play comfortably at 13. The switch didn't seem to make any great difference from today. He played just as well at 13 as he plays at 12. And again, in terms of that hunger for work, it's both sides of the ball. He's always there, as someone potentially to be a receiver, but also when South Africa had the ball, he got through a lot of tackling work today as well.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not just, tackling. His technique is unbelievable. He absolutely dominates it. And his work rate, it's just, for me, it's so relentless. 79th minute, Lions are down by 3 points, kick off, and he's the one that hits the knockback for them to retain the possession. So he's just his all-around game. I think he's just really come into his prime now in terms of, the last couple of seasons he's been injury free. He's put so many games together. His confidence must be soaring. So yeah, look, and to have Bundi beside him today, I think Fergus is right. I think 13 could be his position if he's got a player like Bundi on his inside, because it freed him up today to do so much more than we had seen.
Fergus, what's your assessment of Bundi Aki's performance then? I think we might have lost Fergus, so we'll hopefully get Fergus back in a second. Niamh, you kind of half hit on it there. You felt that Bundi Aki got through quite a bit of work today as well.
Yeah, hugely. I think for someone who hadn't played in a couple of weeks, because obviously there's been no midweek games, he really came through it. I thought he was excellent in defence. His physicality, we always know about, his energy is something that's always associated with it. But we kind of forget also too that he can play ball, and he had a few lovely touches as well. His work rate was phenomenal, and I think the relationship that he has with Robbie in terms of their ability to trust each other just frees both of them up to be able to go and do things. And so I think he'll be so happy to go away, having got a test cap and a start, and to have kind of ticked that box. But I know he'll be disappointed that they lost the series, but I do think he'll take huge confidence from that going into Connacht. Yeah,
we're talking to an Irish audience at the moment, Niamh, so I think people can probably allow us to indulge ourselves maybe breaking down some of the Irish performances over this series. But for Jack Conan, for a guy who wasn't even guaranteed his place in the Leinster team with the emergence of Caelan Doris over the last year and a half, Jack Conan became a real favourite of Warren Gatlin's during this series. What's your assessment of how the number 8 played over the last 3 games?
Yeah, I thought he was excellent, and I'm not surprised. I've been a huge fan of him for a long time. I think his footwork in and around contact is so good. He always seems to find a soft shoulder, and he's got great hands. But I think we kind of, because we know how good he is in that sense, we kind of forget how physical he can be. And he really showed how physical he is over these 3 games. I think for him to go out there and nail a starter spot and then to nail one for 3 weeks in a row is a huge achievement. But I don't even think he's reached his pinnacle yet. I still think there's a lot in him to keep going. I think, he's obviously had his own injury battles as well, where he's come back, and the more games he'll play coming into next season, I think the better he's going to get. But I thought he was excellent, and it was great to see him, physically fronting up to like the South Africans, so that when the question mark comes over whether he is physical or not, then, we can always look back on the series and say, well, we know what he can do.
Fergus McFadden is back with us. Before the series, Conan was maybe raising a few eyebrows, Fergus, when he was picked in the squad. He's become a nailed-on starter for the Lions at number 8. He's going to have a battle to have a starting berth with both Leinster and Ireland, but that's a very good summer's work that Jack Conan has put behind him, Fergus.
Yeah, he's been, one of the outstanding players from the whole tour, not just the test series. I mean, going into it, there was probably a couple of raised eyebrows abroad, certainly not in Ireland. I think his form in Leinster was brilliant. And then that performance he put in for Ireland against England during the Six Nations was standout as well. So, he'll certainly have a lot of competition when he comes back, but he's done himself no harm with the work he's put in over the 3 tests. He's been absolutely brilliant.
No great surprise, Fergus, in terms of Tadhg Furlong either. A lot of passion that he's shown over these 3 games. He's got through a ridiculous amount of work, and particularly going up against that beefy South African pack, he held his own over on that tight head side throughout the series as well. Look, Furlong is basically right up there as the best tight head in the world at the moment.
You'd have to think so, yeah. He seemed like he was a real leader over there, after touring previously in that test series against New Zealand, and he had that experience under his belt, and I'm sure he was one of the first names on the team sheet going into the tests for Warren Gatland, and justifiably so. I think he showed in his performances why he's the best tight head in the Northern Hemisphere.
Niamh, when it comes to Tadhg Furlong, that's a real bonus that he's been able to get through injury-free from the end of the Six Nations, a few games with Leinster at the tail end of the year, and then into a Lions series. Not easy for him having a long layoff with a couple of injuries, and the calf kind of took a while for him to come back, but he's been at his best over the series, hasn't he?
Yeah, hugely. I think his durability as a prop is probably something that stands to him. I also think that if Gatland could have got 80 minutes out of him, he probably would have tried it, because to be fair, I thought the scrum creaked a little bit when he went off. I think I gave away a couple of penalties, and that just goes to show his dominance. I think I heard a stat this morning that this is the 6th test in a row for the Lions, if I'm correct. And so yeah, look, he's brilliant. He's by far and away the best tight head prop in the world, in my opinion. I think his ability to play ball attracts defenders and can put people into space, but also his dominance set piece. And like Fergus said there, you know, he really showed leadership over there. Anything you saw offline in terms of social media and stuff like that, he really seemed to come to the fore. So yeah, he'll be really happy with his couple of months work over there, I think.
I wonder as well, Fergus, particularly when it came to the loosehead side being an issue at different times against the Springboks, whether Warren Gatland will be cursing the fact that due to injury he was never able to get his consistent front row out at any point. Like, he eventually got to start Wyn Jones this time around, but we knew that Wyn Jones was due to start in the first test. Without injuries, he probably never really got that chance to play his first choice front row.
Yeah, maybe not. I think Wyn Jones going off had a big bearing on the game as well. I think he looked like he had a back injury or some sort of injury to his torso. And it's very, very difficult for front rowers to scrummage properly when there's any issues there. Because when he came off and Mako Vunipola came on, they just seemed to kind of struggle in that area. And really in the last 15, 20 minutes of the game, that was kind of the winning and losing of it, was South African dominance at scrum.
Niamh, when we look back on this too, I'm sure, you know, the South African management and the coaching team will look back on this and say, this is exactly how South Africa would like to win a test against the Lions too. Like, just grinding it out right to the end in the final game and getting the result that was required, where they were able to come back from losing the first test. This is pretty much, you know, Jack and Razi's perfect game plan to actually win a series.
Yeah, hugely. I think they also went out today and played a bit more rugby than we had seen them play previously. I think they'll be really pleased with that. I think the fact that they only went in at halftime by, you know, losing by 4 points, I think it was, meant that they could, you know, regather themselves in terms of, look, we've had no territory, no possession, but we're still only kind of a score and a half down. So, like, let's just go out and, you know, do what we can do. We can break up the momentum. We can carry hard. We can put them under pressure at these places. And they really did that. So, look, it was always going to be the way, I think, because they hadn't played in so long and they were going to be so rusty with all the COVID issues as well in the camp. I think after the first test, that was a really must win for the Lions, because South Africa were only going to get better. I just think today, I think the Lions will be ruining all the chances they missed, to be honest, because I think that game was definitely there for the taking.
Yeah, I think when they look back at the video, they look at those chances, particularly in the second half, where they could have got back in front. Fergus, though, does that make South Africa's achievement all the more impressive, given the run-in that they've had? As Niamh mentioned, you know, to have to wait so long before being able to play a test game, the preparations being thrown up in the air because of the COVID-19 situation beforehand. They would have loved more of their frontline players to play for South Africa A against the Lions, but still the world champions were able to compose themselves in the series and arm wrestle this one out in the final day.
Yeah, and I think that's why they're the world champions. You know, not playing games together, you know, until the first test, really officially. That was the first test they played since the World Cup final in 2019. And that's an awful long time ago, against the best players that the Northern Hemisphere has to offer. So, yeah, they definitely grew into the series. But, you know, looking at the second game, we probably thought that the South Africans might win even by a little bit more. So, a really tightly contested final test. And I suppose South Africa showed their brilliance in the way they chose to take the match. And then, you know, what a story with Mornay Steyn coming on and knocking over a kick like he did in 2009 to break the Lions' hearts.
Was that the kind of story we needed to finish this series too? Because, you know, everyone was complaining after the second test, the type of rugby that we saw, the amount of stoppages, the slow play, forwards taking their time to get back up for scrums. It wasn't attractive on the eye. But even if you weren't invested earlier on in the Lions tour, you had a game in the last 10 minutes where the game is in the balance, and right up until the very end of the game, until that penalty goes over for South Africa and the Lions still have a chance to potentially win it after that, we at least got a thrilling finish to this series, even if it was an imperfect 3 games that we had.
Yeah, it was a brilliant way to finish it for you know, supporters watching and spectators. You know, I don't think the second test you know, shed a very, you know, good light on the way that both teams were playing, and certainly stuff that was happening off the ball. And it was just encouraging to see how the Lions went out in the first half and they really just tried to play rugby. You know, they played some really brilliant rugby and probably the best rugby in the game in the first half, and they just couldn't turn some of that possession into more tries because of the South African defence. I think there was a stat where they haven't conceded more than 2 games and more than 2 tries, in over 9 test matches. Like, that's a pretty incredible achievement, and really the South African defence was the winning of the series.
Yeah, Niamh, what comes back to haunt the Lions eventually is 2 tries scored over the course of the 3 games. But then that probably speaks quite a bit, as Fergus just mentioned, about how good South Africa are at locking the game down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jacques Niamh is probably known as one of the best defensive coaches in the world. I think, we got to see him pretty close up here in Munster when he had control of the defence, and it was really interesting to see how they evolved here. So when he's in charge of a team like South Africa, who are that big and that physical and have pace, then basically from a defensive point of view, you can really implement any game plan or strategy that you want. And I think I think Fergus, summed it up perfectly there. Like, probably the South African defence was the winning of the series.
It probably was good, Niamh, in the end that we got to finish this series out with the 3 tests actually being played in Cape Town, because it's not that long ago that we were talking about the impact of COVID-19 and especially the outbreak in the Georgian and the South African camps, and then the Lions having a couple of positive cases which sent players into self-isolation ahead of their warm-up games on South African soil as well. It's probably not great for the Lions product in the grand scheme of things, having a series that's not been played with supporters in the stadiums, all 3 of them having to be in Cape Town. But ultimately getting it finished, South Africa needing the money from these games as well, being pretty crucial for their rugby programme. I'm sure both sides would be quite thankful that we got to the end of the 3rd test without this series falling apart.
Yeah, hugely. I think obviously the disruptions are very well known, but we only get to see a small glimpse of it. And I think the team behind the lines have done incredibly well to be able to keep the ball rolling. I think there was definitely times during the build up to the first test where people were questioning whether it was even viable to have a test series there, and whether it was actually probably morally right, considering how rampant COVID was over in South Africa. So I think from that aspect, the fact that really since the 2nd or 3rd week in South Africa, neither camp has been impacted too much by it is a testament to obviously the players and the management, but also people that are behind the scenes, because I think it's very difficult to try and keep groups that size and that large, to stay indoors and stay isolated from general public, I think, and you're trying to keep boredom away and trying to think up things that you can do that's safe for them. So look, I think you're dead right in terms of the funding. The money was really important to the South African rugby, but also I think it just goes to show how much the fans and how important they are to the Lions. I think you talk to anybody, it wasn't just the rugby that they were turned off by the first 2 tests. It was also the lack of atmosphere and that carnival environment that we associated with just wasn't there. So I've no doubt, 4 years' time, Australia, they'll definitely be looking to ramp it back up and hopefully, they'll be able to do that. Yeah,
really looking forward to fans being back when we go back down under. Many thanks to both Niamh and to Fergus for joining us. Morné Steyn kicking the winner, making it feel like it's 2009 all over again. The British and Irish Lions tour are here on OTB Sports as well, brought to you by Vodafone, lead partner of the Lions. We will take a very short break. We'll be looking ahead to the second of the All-Ireland hurling semi-finals when we come back.
The 2021 British and Irish Lions Tour.
On Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions.
Tech Talk. With Jess Kelly.
On the latest Tech Talk, the CEO of Buy Me will join me to discuss the booming business that is food shopping online. Chef Nevin Maguire will explain why his iPhone has become a vital tool